Ever seen a medieval helmet with a long, pointed snout and thought, why would anyone wear that? That's the so-called pigface helmet, and it wasn't made to look funny or scary. It was a smart piece of battlefield engineering. The shape helped blows slide off, the extra space protected the nose and mouth, and the tiny holes were placed to let air in without making the face an easy target. In this video, we'll break down what this helmet really was, who wore it, and why it made sense in real medieval combat. Number 1. The helmet type. The pigface helmet wasn't a full animal mask, and it wasn't a joke piece. It's a modern nickname for a specific late medieval visor, a long, pointed faceplate attached to a bascinet. A bascinet was one of the standard fighting helmets for many European men-at-arms in the late 1300s and early 1400s. Early bascinets were open-faced, basically a steel skull cap worn over a padded hood, often paired with a curtain of mail that protected the neck and shoulders. That mail curtain is usually called an aventail or camail, and it was commonly attached to the helmet with small metal loops around the rim and a leather lace, so the mail could move with the shoulders while the helmet stayed stable on the head. When armorers added a visor, the bascinet became a full, close helmet for its day. You could cover the face for the dangerous moment of contact, then lift the visor when you needed air and awareness. The pigface look comes from the visor's profile. It sticks out forward like a snout, tapering to a point, with narrow eye slits and small breathing holes. In English, you'll also hear hounskull or houndskull, and in German, the related term is often given as hounskull. Those names all point to the same idea. The visor resembles an animal muzzle. But the key thing is that it was built for function. On a battlefield, the head is the highest value target, and once more fighters started wearing strong body armor, the face and the gaps around the neck became even more important. This style belongs to the later part of the Middle Ages, not the early Dark Ages image people sometimes mix it up with. It fits the period when plate armor was becoming more complete, better arm and leg defenses, stronger chest protection, and more weapons designed specifically to deal with armor. In that environment, the visor isn't just decoration. It's a controlled way to trade comfort for protection at the exact moment you expect to take a hit. That timing, open when it's safer, closed when it's dangerous, is the whole logic of the design. Number 2. The pointed visor. Once you know what the helmet is, the next question is why anyone would choose a long snout instead of a flatter, simpler faceplate. Part of the answer is the evolution of helmets over time. Earlier in the Middle Ages, a lot of knights used a great helm, a big, boxy helmet that covered the whole head. Great helms could be tough, but they were heavy, hot, and didn't give great vision. So fighters often wore a smaller helmet underneath, like an early bascinet, and used the great helm mainly for the first clash, especially on horseback. As armor improved and fighting on foot became more common for elite soldiers, the bascinet took over because it balanced protection with movement. When you add a visor to a bascinet, shape becomes everything. A flat plate can stop a cut, but it tends to absorb a hit straight on. An angled surface changes what happens at impact. A sword cut, an axe edge, or even a pole weapon head is more likely to skid away if it hits a slope instead of a wall. Medieval armorers didn't need modern physics formulas to learn this. They learned it through testing, damage, and hard experience. Every millimeter mattered in armor work. Small changes saved lives.
A pointed visor takes advantage of angles in a very direct way. It gives a narrowing target, and it creates a lot of sloped surface. If a blow lands off-center, it has less chance to stick and more chance to slide. That matters because even when armor isn't pierced, the force still travels through the metal into the skull and neck. Anything that turns a solid hit into a glancing hit can make the difference between staying in the fight and being stunned, or worse. There's also a simple spacing benefit. A visor that projects forward gives extra room in front of the nose and mouth. That means if the visor takes a hit, there's less chance the metal is driven back into the face. Helmets are not only about penetration resistance, they're also about controlling blunt force and preventing the armor itself from becoming the injury. The snout isn't a perfect solution, though. It adds length and some weight out front, so the helmet has to fit well and the visor has to lock securely, otherwise it can twist or bounce when it gets struck. That's one reason you see careful latch designs and strong pivot points. At the same time, the bascinet skull itself is often smoothly rounded and slightly pointed at the crown for the same reason. It encourages blows to slide rather than land flat. Number 3. Battlefield threats. Late medieval fighting wasn't just swords swinging in big arcs. On foot, one of the common knight weapons was the pole axe or similar pole weapon, designed for armored opponents. These combined a hammer face, an axe blade, and a spike. The spike is the helmet designer's nightmare. It's narrow, it concentrates force, and it can hunt for weak points. A rounded or flat visor can be vulnerable if it offers a clean, straight line into an opening. The pigface visor, with its long cone, makes that clean line harder to find. This matters because armored combat often turns into a search for gaps. If you can't easily cut through a breastplate, you look for the face, the throat, the armpit, the inside of the elbow, the back of the knee. That's why late medieval manuals talk so much about controlling the opponent, binding weapons, and using short, accurate thrusts instead of wide swings. Daggers show up here too, because once fighters are chest to chest, a short blade can be used to work into openings. A closed visor blocks one of the most tempting targets on the body and makes it harder to fish for the eyes and nose. Eye slits show the trade-off clearly. They have to exist, but they're always risky. Many snouted visors have narrow slits under a slight brow that helps shield the opening from above. A longer visor also lets the slits sit a bit farther back from the very front, so an opponent's point has to travel farther and more accurately to reach the eyes. In practice, the wearer is usually looking slightly downward through the slits, which fits close combat. Most threats are in front and below the eye line, especially when someone is trying to get inside your guard. Missile weapons are part of this picture too. Arrows and crossbow bolts could and did kill armored men, especially at close range or when they struck a weak point. A visor adds another layer and another set of angles for a projectile to defeat. A pointed faceplate can help a bolt glance away rather than hit square. It doesn't make anyone immune, but it can shift the odds, especially against shots that would otherwise hit a flat faceplate directly. Armorers reinforced these visors in different ways. Some had a raised ridge down the center to stiffen the metal. Many had strong edges and solid locks, so the visor could be secured and wouldn't pop open from a hit. Under the steel, fighters wore thick padding to manage shock, and around the helmet's lower edge, mail was often laced on as an aventail to protect the throat and shoulders.
Put together, the whole system is about denying easy targets in a fight where easy targets get hunted on purpose. Number 4. Air and openings. A fully closed helmet creates a basic conflict. The more you seal it, the harder it is to breathe and the easier it is to overheat. A visor has to let air in, and it has to let some sound out so commands can be heard. But every hole is also a weak point. The snouted visor is a clever compromise because it gives more surface area and more internal volume in front of the mouth and nose. That extra volume means the wearer isn't breathing right against a flat plate. Air can circulate a little better, and exhaled air has more space before it fogs the eye slits. Many surviving visors have a pattern of small holes, often concentrated more on one side than the other. That placement isn't random. Putting openings straight at the front would create a direct path for a weapon point. Shifting the holes to the side still feeds air, but it forces an opponent to land a more awkward, angled thrust to take advantage of them. In a lot of examples, the safer side is kept more solid, often the left side, because most opponents were right-handed, and many dangerous thrusts would come from that direction. It's not a perfect rule, but it matches what you see again and again. Armorers cared about where the risk actually came from. The hinge and locking system mattered just as much as the metal shape. Some visors pivoted on side pins near the temples and locked with a latch, a spring pin, or a strap and buckle. Another common system, especially in parts of the German world, was the Klapp visor, a visor with a single hinge point at the center of the forehead that lifted up as one piece. To the wearer, this changes how fast you can open the face, how secure it feels in a grapple, and how easily it can be repaired if a pin bends or a latch breaks.
And because a visor could be swapped, some fighters owned more than one different styles for different risks, or simply replacing a damaged piece without changing the whole helmet. Vision was limited, and that was accepted as the price of protection. Fighters trained to move their whole head and upper body more, and to rely on distance, posture, and contact awareness instead of wide peripheral vision. In many cases, a man-at-arms would keep the visor open while marching or waiting, then close it right before contact. If the fight broke or there was a lull, opening the visor again wasn't just comfort. It was a practical step to reduce heat buildup, prevent fogging, and keep situational awareness as high as possible. It also kept flying debris, splinters, and dust out of the eyes during the chaotic moment when weapons and bodies collided. Number 5. Who wore it? When people hear knight, they often picture a single elite group, all equipped the same way. Real late medieval armies were more layered. The pig-faced bascinet is most associated with men-at-arms, heavily armored fighters who could include knights, squires, and other professional soldiers paid and equipped for close combat. These helmets weren't cheap, but they were not one-off fantasy items either. They were part of an equipment economy made by specialist armorers, sold through networks of merchants, repaired by local workshops, and sometimes passed along or inherited. A well-made helmet was a major investment, and that also explains why designs that worked tended to spread quickly. On campaign, the bascinet fit neatly into the full armor stack. It worked with a male aventail, with padded collars designed to support the helmet's weight, and later with additional throat plates in some setups. The helmet was usually held in place by straps and by how it sat on the arming cap, because if a helmet shifts in a fight, it becomes dangerous. Inside, a leather or cloth liner and a chin strap helped keep the skull centered on the head, and padding spread the load so the edge of the helmet didn't dig into the brow during hard movement. A visor that's a little loose is not a minor annoyance. It can block sight, open at the wrong moment, or turn a hit into a twisting force on the neck. It also helps to remember how battles were actually fought. In the 100 Years' War era, for example, men-at-arms might fight mounted at first and then dismount to hold ground or push through rough terrain. A bascinet with a visor gave protection whether you were on a horse or on foot, without the extreme weight and heat of a full great helm. In tournaments, where the threat is a direct lance impact,
and the rules push toward maximum head protection, you can still see layering. Some fighters wore a bascinet underneath and added a heavier great helm over it for specific jousts. In war, where threats could come from multiple angles and you might need to move fast, the visored bascinet was a flexible balance. Manufacturing also matters for understanding why the shape spread. Many bassinet skulls were raised from a single piece of metal, which creates strength without seams, and then finished to smooth out hammer marks. Visors could be made and fitted with careful pin alignment, so they opened cleanly, but locked tight. Quality varied, of course, but the underlying design is very industrial for its time. Standardized features, repeatable shapes, parts that could be replaced, and a clear focus on durability. Number 6. Myths and evidence. The pigface nickname can make the past feel strange, and it often pushes people toward the wrong explanation, like, "It was meant to look scary," or "It was a joke." Medieval armor design was competitive and expensive. If a shape became common, it usually did so because it helped keep people alive, or at least improved their chances under the conditions of the day.
It's also easy to assume medieval people called it a pig helmet in everyday speech. But many of the catchy names used now are later descriptions. Bascinet is a modernized term drawn from medieval languages, and houndskull is mainly a modern label used by historians and collectors to describe that animal muzzle profile. Period documents often talk in broader equipment terms, rather than giving every specific visor style a neat nickname. So how do we know what these helmets looked like and how they worked? We have surviving examples in major collections, plus artwork and written references. When you look at real pieces, the practical details stand out. The exact hinge points, the locking pins, the reinforcement ridges, the spacing of the breathing holes, and the wear marks where mail and straps sat. You can also see that these helmets weren't all identical. Some visors are longer, some are shorter and more compact, and the patterns of holes and the locking systems vary. That variation is useful because it shows armorers were solving the same problems with slightly different priorities. More air versus more protection. More strength versus more weight. You can even spot practical details like repaired rivets, replaced pins, and wear around the rim where the mail was repeatedly laced on and off. That's a reminder that these helmets lived hard lives. They were carried on campaign, knocked around in transport, dented in fights, and kept in service as long as they could be trusted. By the mid-1400s, other helmets take over in many places, like the sallet, often paired with a bavor to cover the lower face and throat, and later the armet, which wraps closer around the head with a different kind of cheek and visor system. Those designs aim for a closer fit, smoother lines, and in some cases better vision, without a long forward projection. The pig-faced bassinet sits right in that transition period. And once you see it as an engineering choice, angles, spacing, locks, airflow, it stops looking like a weird costume and starts looking like a serious tool built for a very specific kind of war.